everybody, my name is Citrus, and it is finally time. After 5 long years of waiting, we have a brand new 3D Sonic game. I was thinking about this earlier. This is a pretty monumental moment for the series and the channel. I started this YouTube channel around the time when Sonic Forces came out, and we have been covering pretty much everything, all the rumors, leaks, information, anything we could get our hands on for the next 3D mainline Sonic game. And now it's finally out. I remember when this game was referred to as Sonic Project 2021, Sonic Project 2022, Sonic Rangers, all the way until now when we finally have Sonic Frontiers in our hands. And I've played it, I've beat it, I have so many things to say about this game. It's been a very, very long journey, but now that I'm finally here, we can discuss Sonic Frontiers. A few things I should mention before we actually jump into it. Even though I was holding the Switch copy earlier, I actually played this game on PC, so keep that in mind when we talk about resolution, performance, things like that. And also, this is going to be a no spoilers review. Next week, I will be doing my spoilers review, and we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of specific things about the game. But for right now, we're just kind of doing an overview. Starting with the story, you have Sonic, Tails, and Amy heading to these mysterious Starfall Islands as Tails has tracked down the 7 Chaos Emeralds to this one location, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, when suddenly their plane gets struck by something, they all spiral down and end up in cyberspace, where Sonic manages to escape, but Tails and Amy don't, and now Sonic must find out how to save his friends from this digital dimension, while also fighting these giant robotic monsters known as Titans, and finding out what the intentions are of this mysterious new villain known as Sage. It definitely has a sort of Sonic Adventure quality to it, as you're getting pieces of a large narrative that only makes sense towards the end of the game when all those pieces start to come together and you get a full picture of everything that is going on. And it is a pretty enjoyable story. There's lots of little lore revelations that come out in this game that have a pretty significant impact on the series as a whole. In general, I'd say it's probably the best narrative that we've received since Sonic Unleashed, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it is on par with Sonic Unleashed. While the story itself is really good, I'd say that Unleashed had a better presentation of its story. Sonic Frontiers falters in some regards during those parts where you'd have a big plot reveal. It just wouldn't be shown in the most grandiose way. That's just compared to Sonic Unleashed though. Compared to any of the Sonic games that came out in the past 10 years, it really knocks those out of the water. It's no competition. It's the first time in a very long time that a story in a Sonic game has actually propelled me to keep going. And one of the big reasons why I think the story is just so compelling is the writing. This is a extremely well-written game. We all knew that Ian Flynn was going to be doing the script for this game, and I'm sure many of us were very excited to see what he'd do with it, since his work on the Sonic IDW comics as well as the Archie comics is just so good, and he has such a good understanding of these characters. It was exciting to see what he'd bring to the table, and as expected, he is bringing the same level of quality and consistency from that series into the games. His characterization of the cast carries over from his time on the comics into the games, and it's excellent to see his writing style animated and just take life in a game where you have Amy, Tails, Knuckles, all feeling really, really good, and especially Tails. They just have so much depth to their character now, and they haven't seen so much character development in quite a bit of time. They really feel like real characters in this game. Not to mention Sonic, who himself has seen some weird changes over time, but in this game feels like a nice blend of cockiness and attitude, but also being kind-hearted and nice, and also even smart at times. Even Eggman has a pretty solid character arc throughout the game, by the end of it making you really feel for Eggman. It's a huge contrast from games like Sonic Colors or Lost World, where they tried to take these very three-dimensional characters and flatten them, make them more stereotyped and just uninteresting. whereas now Ian Flynn has taken these characters, added the depth back into them, and I'd say even adding more depth to them, making their potential huge for future games. Not to mention the callbacks to previous games and characters, some of which actually have pretty big implications for the series as a whole. Really, the only writing complaint I have is with Sage, the new character. I just didn't really get very connected with her character in any way. I feel like they could have spent a little bit more time setting her up and really getting into her intentions and goals so that you could really see the full scope of her character, because as it stands, I was kind of like, okay, fine. It's a little bit hard to get into without spoilers, but I just wanted a little bit more from Sage. But overall, writing is excellent in this game. It leaves the characters on a really good point and just makes me so excited to see where they take them in the future, because it really opens the door for actual growth in their characters, which is so exciting. But of course, games aren't just all plot and story, you need gameplay, and that is where Sonic Frontiers introduces the brand new open zone gameplay style, which is the first time that they're doing this sort of thing, going for a more open world style direction. And for me personally, it has always been my dream to see Sonic go in the open world direction. It fits with the idea of Sonic and freedom and everything that the character is about so well as just being a good idea from a gameplay perspective, as it just gives you so much room to run around and explore and really do what you want with this character whose main thing is going fast. And I pretty much got what I wanted with this game, as it is so much more open and freeing than some of the previous games that we've gotten in the series, like Generations, Colors, and Unleashed. While those games are still good, this game just lets you run around and explore so much more than those ever could. There are tons of little challenges and puzzles to do, different enemies to fight, and just collectibles to find. There's so much to do that it's really kind of overwhelming, but in a sort of good way. Like you're just constantly bouncing from thing to thing, doing everything that is within your sight. I must say though, Sonic Frontiers unfortunately falls into that ever so common open world design trope of just being a little too monotonous. You're kind of doing the same things over and over again, and while those things do change ever so slightly with new puzzles, different enemies, harder platforming segments, they still feel a little similar to each other. They're not drastic enough changes to really make you feel like you're doing anything truly new. And in particular with those platforming segments, there were times where I was getting a bit frustrated with them, especially when I'd just be trying to explore the open world, when I'd accidentally run into a dash panel that I couldn't see on the ground, which would then force me into a platforming segment that I didn't necessarily want to do. Moments like those really made me think back to Sonic Forces, where there were dash panels everywhere and the game was just constantly forcing you along a path, even if you didn't necessarily want to take that path. However, I found that if I was getting a little bit bored of doing one thing in the open world, I could go and do something else, like a cyberspace level, or do puzzles instead of platforming, or platforming instead of puzzles, and it would generally relieve me of some of that fatigue. I feel like Frontiers is really great in this regard, as you can kind of take the game at your own pace, do things as you please, and no matter what you do, you're still progressing the game in some way. Not to mention Sonic's speed in this game, allowing you to go pretty much wherever you want, whenever you want, with really no holds barred. And while we're talking about Sonic's speed, let's talk about the controls in this game, as I think they are really good. Sonic controls excellently in this game. You can move so goddamn quickly, breakneck speeds, but are still able to stop on a dime and turn tight corners, and it just feels really nice. But of course, everyone has their preference with how Sonic games control, and that's where some of the options come into play, as the game initially asks you if you want to play in a high speed mode for people who are more used to Sonic games like Adventure and Adventure 2, or a more precision platforming mode, which slows Sonic down a little bit to make some of those tight platforming segments a little bit easier. On top of that, in the settings, you can actually fine-tune Sonic's settings even further, setting his maximum boosting speed or maximum starting speed, turning speed, all of that stuff to really refine your experience to make Sonic feel the best that you think Sonic should feel. For me personally, it was really fun cranking all those sliders to the max, having Sonic go fast literally all the time, and just seeing how stupid fast he could go. And related to the controls is the new combat system, which we haven't really quite seen in a Sonic game. There was the Werehog in Sonic Unleashed, but the combat in Frontiers feels very, very different from the Werehog. Where the Werehog was slow and a little clunky at times, Frontiers feels fast and fluid. It's super fun to combo the enemies and use all your different special moves to try and attack multiple enemies at a time, or to just do as maximum damage as you can against one certain enemy. On top of that, the moves are all really cool looking and flashy, making it fun just to execute some of your favorite moves. I did find that the combat felt a little bit loose at times. There were moments where I felt like if I was doing inputs too quickly, then they wouldn't register, so you'd need to hit a button and then wait a second before hitting the next in order for that move to register. Overall, it is a really fun system that just needs a few minor tweaks, mainly shortening the time between inputs for the special moves so they feel a little bit more intentional. But if they expand on this in the future and really just flesh out this combat system even more, there's huge potential here. Where the combat really shines though is in the boss fights. You have the Guardians like Ninja, Asura, Tower, and tons more, and for the most part they're really fun. You have multiple ways to take them down, you're discovering strategies along the way to take them down faster, and they just generally have cool designs and are satisfying to fight. However, some of these later Guardians are just straight up annoying, forcing you to fight them, or oftentimes having some sort of win condition where you need to do a few steps before you can even do damage against the main unit, which just makes fighting some of these enemies more difficult than it needs to be and kind of ruins the flow of combat. But when you are in the mood to fight these enemies, you usually get a pretty satisfying battle. Then there are the larger bosses, the Titans, and they are absolutely incredible to fight. You have epic proportions, incredible spectacle, banging music. It just makes every boss fight feel like the final boss. However, that's also a little bit of a downside, as Frontiers never really gets much more hype than that first Titan fight. Granted, it doesn't get worse either. It just sort of stagnates. The peak is set there, and it kind of just stays there throughout the whole game. However, I feel like that's hardly a complaint, since you're getting multiple Dark Gaia-esque fights within just one game. Oh, and a quick tip for people who are still playing the game: before the final boss, you should definitely switch to hard mode before you engage. Trust me, you're just going to want to do it. But now that we've discussed the open zone, and the combat, and the controls, we really gotta discuss cyberspace. And I'll just say up front, this is my least favorite part of the game. I'd say it's the most underbaked part of the game. That's not to say they aren't fun. They are a nice change of pace from the open world, but I wish a little bit more effort was put into them. Having these linear levels within the open world is a really good idea, but when they're just reusing level designs and assets from Sonic Generations, it sours their potential. And before someone says it, I know that there are story reasons for why this is the case, but in my opinion, it feels like that is just the story covering for the gameplay rather than elevating it. Like, here's an idea I had while I was writing the script. What if Sonic couldn't go back into cyberspace after he got out? So he'd need to ask Tails and Amy to help him out by completing these levels, and you got to play as Tails and Amy, who would play completely different from Sonic. I feel like it'd be way more interesting than just having mediocre boost levels again. But that's kind of detracting from the main point. As it stands, they're still decently fun. You know, I had a good time playing through them. I thought they were fun to, get S ranks on, get all the red rings, and even recognizing which levels they pulled from certain past games did kind of make me feel a little bit nostalgic. And the last gameplay thing to talk about are the mini-games, mostly fishing. The fishing in this game is really, really charming. You get to hang out with Big the Cat, you do this simple little fishing mini-game, but it is incredibly satisfying to just catch these fish, see what cool new fish that you unlock, seeing the little animations and things with them, as well as references to previous games in the fishing minigame. It's just, they put a surprising amount of love into it. Plus, as you fish, you unlock these fishing points, which you can use to unlock certain items in the game, including these Eggman voice memos, which are just fascinating to listen to and really add to Eggman's character in this game. Not to mention all the other minigames that pop up as you play through the story. These are mostly one and dones in the story. You don't really get to go back and do them again, but it's a nice treat whenever they pop up. It's a fun change of pace. The only minigame that was kind of annoying for me was this Starfall event, where suddenly these little star crystal things start falling from the sky, and collecting them would make this slot machine spin, and it just was annoying. You'd get coins for the fishing minigame, but it just felt unnecessary to me. It lasts way too long, the slot machine is really loud, and also it's just in the center of your screen, potentially blocking important things. I found it more annoying than helpful. But to summarize the kind of minigames portion of Sonic Frontiers, fishing's great, the minigames in the story are great, Starfall kind of sucks. But now that we're kind of winding down with this review, let's discuss visuals. Like I mentioned earlier, I played Sonic Frontiers on PC, and it is just gorgeous. The Starfall Islands are beautiful. The realistic environment with these ancient ruins sets a pretty nice tone for the game. Not very unique, but you know, pretty nice. I've heard some people complain about the lack of Sonic staples like loop-de-loops and other classic Sonic motifs, and while I don't disagree with this, people, I feel like that's kind of the point. The Starfall Islands are supposed to be this mysterious place where, you know, everything feels kind of foreign. It's supposed to be a place that is completely alien to anything else we've seen in the series, so having loop-de-loops and stuff would kind of detract from that. With that said though, a loop-de-loop wouldn't hurt. I think that'd be fun. And then in cutscenes, you have the characters who are all wonderfully animated. I'd say this is the best animated Sonic game in a very, very long time, especially in the modern 3D era. I don't know if any previous Sonic game quite hits the mark that the animation in this game has. It's really expressive and fun, and combining that with the excellent script and the excellent voice acting in this game, you get a really, really quality Sonic story experience just overall. Oh, and there's also poppin' in this game. It's pretty noticeable, but it didn't really affect my experience too much. But of course, your mileage will vary depending on the machine you play it on, so keep that in mind. I have been playing the game on Switch a little bit recently, and it is kinda rough. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that version of the game. And the last thing to discuss in this review, the music, which is pretty dang good. The open zone tracks are really soothing and somber. It's a very different take for a Sonic game, but it kind of makes sense given the atmosphere of the Starfall Islands while you're exploring. It wouldn't necessarily make sense to have really upbeat, jovial Sonic music, but that's not to say that that kind of music doesn't exist in Frontiers, as in certain mini-games, during boss fights, during cyberspace, you will find tracks that are more in line with what you'd expect from Sonic. And like I mentioned earlier, the Titan fights, banging music. So good. While I wouldn't say that this OST has the same level of charm as games like Adventure 2, Generations, or Unleashed, it fits this game very nicely. It has a unique sound identity, and that's really what I want in Sonic games, is for each of the soundtracks to fit that game individually, rather than try and fit some sort of abstract Sonic sound, if you get what I mean. To sort of summarize, this game feels like Sonic Team has just had their ambition sparked once again, trying to push the series forward with a new gameplay style, a wild story, and writing that just puts the past 10 years of games to shame, really. It is definitely not a perfect game. It falls into some of the classic open world design pitfalls. It has some technical issues, and at times the game still feels like it's trying to find its footing. But as a first step in this new decade of Sonic games, I think it's a really great start. If you're not as avid of a Sonic fan, I could see how some people wouldn't get as much out of this game, but if you are a Sonic fan, you are going to find so much to enjoy in this game. And after 5 long years of waiting for this game to come out, I'm happy to say that I think Sonic Frontiers was worth it, and for the first time in quite a while, I feel nothing but excitement to see what Sonic Team does next with this new open zone style of Sonic game. And so, those are my thoughts on Sonic Frontiers. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, click the button. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, because of course, this isn't the end. I have my spoilers review coming up soon, so if you haven't beat the game yet, maybe try and do that soon. And yeah, we've got plenty more Frontiers content coming down. Even after the spoilers review, I do have plans to do some more Frontiers content and lots of ideas kicking around the brain, so just stick around for that. Of course, but once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for sticking around for such a long video. Thank you for watching my previous videos talking about Frontiers in the lead up to the game, all the discussion, the rumors. It's all been leading up to this, so I want to say thanks. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Peace.